Greetings everyone, love and peace to all that is present here. Welcome to Voyance Avenue. Here, we closely observe supernatural phenomena from various individuals throughout the world, such as astral projections, ayahuasca ceremonies, near-death experiences and more. Today we have an incredible story from a Reddit user, who carefully prepared their ayahuasca ceremony, but wasn't quite prepared for intense experience that came ahead. So sit back, relax, and have a listen to what this person experienced. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel, as it will help us towards our goal of reaching 1000 subscribers for monetization. We hope that all of you will enjoy the same way we did. Now on with the story.
I have tried to write as much as I could, but some things are intensely private and I can't share them here. I'm more than happy to talk to you privately about it though if you have any questions. I don't want you to read this and think I'm going to go do that. It took me 2 years to prepare myself for this. It's taken me 2 years to get to this stage. I have done some reading on its use, but was never ready to take this step until the end of this summer. Physically and mentally exhausted, day after day bleeding into each other until it was all a gray droning landscape. We managed to find both plants and brewed them for 12 hours until we were left with a thick, almost syrupy tea. We saved the leaves and vine, unsure what to do with them. We weren't allowed to leave the leaves alone as they brewed and took it in turns to stir. 2 years worth of research meant we tried to stay as close to the native tribal customs and prep as possible. 2 days later we were in Scotland. I had hired out a log cabin with a peat fire away from people and civilization. Greg was going to be my dietero to guide me. I didn't know until later he would also make sure I didn't hurt myself, get lost, or trapped. We waited for dusk, called family and friends, and prepared the setting. As we moved around, tidying up the hut, cleaning things away and making a safe space, we became subdued and introspective. We had earlier joked about turning cannibal on the tea or waking up the next day up a tree, but now we seemed quiet, contemplative. Greg had a third of a cup, I had a full cup, and we set them out in front of the roaring fire. I smudged the hut by burning white sage and marking the corners, supposedly creating a safe space. I am eternally glad we did now, looking back, knowing that Aya would slam me into one of the large glass doors and the firewood in front of it. We drank the tea, grimacing at the taste, then sat down and waited. We talked about how we thought it was the wrong dosage, that the plants might have been wrong, that it might not work at all. I suddenly felt tired and lay down on the sofa. I saw a universe of stars and running across it was a river, coming closer. "Are you okay?" Greg asked. I sat up and opened my eyes. "Yeah, she says she's coming," I said. Hearing the words coming out of my mouth and not quite believing I had said them, they sounded alien to me. I had no idea who she was or how I knew she was coming. But it was true. She was coming closer. I stared across at Greg. The more I stared, his face became more and more transparent. His face was now bones and muscles and veins all overlaid on his skull. As gruesome as it sounded, it wasn't scary. It felt like my perceptions had started to widen. I noticed a beautiful golden light spreading from the wall behind and inside him. Greg was watching me, and when he smiled at my slack-jawed staring, I laughed. My laughs looked like flat, cold bubbles of air escaping up from the ocean, flattened by pressure. The lights and shapes that were around Greg seemed to brighten and shine more brilliantly when he smiled. I could hear myself laughing, but in a way I've never heard before. Later, Greg would tell me I sounded totally different. My voice sounded like it had when I was a kid, free, innocent. My voice started to sound different to myself, and sounds began to shudder and phase. Time skipped every few moments. Then they would speed up or slow down. My synesthesia grew large, filled the room and disappeared. Greg said something about looking at other things in the room, and I looked down at the wooden table. The lines and circles in the wood seemed to float and move. As I looked down, faces and eyes seemed to appear and look back at me, telling me stories, voices overlapping. Ayahuasca seemed to be talking to me, telling me that she was coming, that I had to listen, to shut up and get ready for her coming. As she spoke, she pushed down on my head, neck and shoulders. I slipped off the sofa and stared into the wood, but she wasn't satisfied. She pushed down even further until I was half sitting, half lying, positioned to listen to her. Greg checked if I was okay, and I tried to answer him to tell him to relax, and I was okay, but the fact I took my attention away just seemed to madden her even more. She punished me and I threw up. I threw up into the bucket, and the air seemed to be filled with golden strands of light, like a cobweb trying to entice me in. I threw up again, red fractals into the bucket. They swirled and shifted. They became the faces of dead bodies, skulls and decomposing bodies. People dead and buried and decomposed. I whispered to her I don't want to see this, and the image changed into a sun. Everything in duality, she told me as she left. As long as you know that for everything good there is bad, for everything negative there is positive. Everything is duality. The sun appeared to me, and Aya had left me to talk to the sun, and I listened. Spit and mucus and tears running off my face. The sun spoke to me and told me Greg was my shaman. I replied, I know. Greg is a good friend for bringing you here to talk. The sun said, I know. I replied, he can't hear my side of the conversation. Can he? The sun asked. I answered again with I know. You just keep saying I know, the sun remarked, and we both laughed. This was a necessary stage to sum up everything that I knew up to now so we could move on. Greg asked me again if I was okay, and the sun left me. Aya had returned and she became jealous I was listening to Greg. She was greedy and wanted all my attention. She wanted me to listen only to her, so she punished me again and I threw up. Each time seemed to be more and more violent until it seemed I was throwing up inside throwing up. Each time I threw up I seemed to be throwing up a part of myself. My ego, my fears, my personality, my worries, my petty ineffective lies I told myself and others. The sun had completely left now, and Aya reached down, grabbed me and threw me onto the low table that was in the middle of the room. She wanted me to listen, so I told her I was listening. She pushed me harder and harder. The room around me seemed to grow, walls shooting away and upwards into the sky. Are you listening? Are you listening? She hammered me again and I threw up again. Again and again she kept hammering me, smashing me against the floor, and each time I answered her, I'm listening, until I was slamming my fists on the table and screaming at her in the fire, I'm listening. The last time seemed to satisfy her, and the voices that had surrounded me like jurors in a courtroom. Aya picked me up like a mother cat would pick up a kitten and threw me across the room and across the universe. My body began to convulse and my eyes couldn't decide if they should stay open or closed. Red and white lines seemed to trail across the golden strands as well, and I realized they were my arms and legs and shoulders that had spasmed into tight bundles. I tried to relax them and she continued to push me, hound me, tell me to listen, until she started to push me into those red and white lines. At this point I had flung myself into the opposite side of the room. The cold floor was cooling and soothing against my face. I went deeper and deeper between those strands of the universe. The incredible shrinking man, going deeper until the strands were pillars and arches, bridges and skyscrapers. On and on she pushed, and I saw things crawling along these strands. Spiders without arms, eyes without bodies. They flashed blue and white as I flew towards, and between them they turned red and green, excited that I was there. On and on she dragged me through until I was right up against the wall of the universe. I was terrified. I called out to Greg to check if he was still sober. I begged him to stay sober so I wouldn't get lost. He seemed to be so far away, standing at the door on the right side of the universe. My way back. Please, Greg, stay sober. Don't trip or we'll both be lost and we won't be able to get back. I saw giant beetles trundle by me like cruise ships. They knew I was there, but they ignored me and carried on doing whatever essential part of universal maintenance they did. Their purple and turquoise shells and carapaces seemed to be lined with gold and studded with jewels. The things on the other side of the universe seemed to get even more interested in me and trundled closer in their benign curiosity. I felt trapped and terrified, and I told myself that no matter what would happen, this would end. Ayahuasca waited for me, and she pushed me through the other side. I think I blacked out, and when I came to, I was lying flat against the glass doors, my body draped and slowly convulsing over the firewood. I whispered to Greg for a pillow and blanket. I was tired of her, so I wanted to pretend to go to sleep, so she'd leave me alone. She wasn't buying it and flipped me onto my back. She toyed with me, showing me that she could control my body like a puppeteer pulls at strings. My hips convulsed and my arms and legs thrashed against the floor. She wanted me to know that she was in control. She made me lift up my arm and slam it back down on the floor. She had stripped me of my ego, stripped me of all the piddly things and stress I'd been carrying with me all these months, years perhaps. I was just myself, my pure self, like a little core of light I gave up. I was all hers. She had destroyed me, wiped me clean and turned me into a blank page. No memories, no concept of self except that little burning light, true ego death. I was ready to listen and turn onto my back and stare up to the ceiling. She rewarded me. It exploded into a million suns, fractals lining and shifting with each other, cobwebs of the universe glowing and shifting above me. I saw falcons, hundreds, watching me, their blue eyes full of calm and peace. No judgment. They came closer and closer, and I realized that they had always been there. They came closer. The patterns on their light blue wings seemed to shift in rhythm. Their wings wrapped around my right arm and sank in until my right arm seemed to glow with a beautiful golden light, tattooed with falcon wings. She told me she was going to answer my questions. I think I mumbled something to Greg like, "Hold on for this. Here it comes." I was sitting on the edge of the universe. My arm glowed, patterns of gold spinning out of it. I was stuck. She was quiet and I felt incomplete. Something was missing. Something was fundamentally missing and I needed something. The wings and eyes of the falcons on my arms seemed to slowly rotate patiently. I whispered to Greg, amazed and pleased that from so far away, so small I could still speak. My voice sounded comforting to me. "Greg, I will give you all the money I have in the world if you get me a pen and paper." Greg got up and started looking for pen and paper. Ayahuasca laughed that I had hidden the pen in Greg and I had talked about not hiding stuff before taking the tea. She laughed again and we waited. Greg asked me where I would have put the pen. I barely knew my own name and just begged him to come closer. If I couldn't write down what she was going to tell me, I would tell him and beg him to remember. Aya laughed again, gently mocking, "You know what his memory's like." I laughed too and asked her to wait. Greg came over and gave me the pen and paper. He had already written some of the stuff I'd be saying down, and Aya whispered to me, like a mischievous, jealous girl, that Greg had the pen and paper all this time and that I shouldn't have trusted him, that I should just listen to her from now on. I knew she was tricksy. She is as old as the universe. She wasn't a god, but part of everything. She runs around its edge like a river for anyone that wants to visit her. But she was lonely and she wanted. She demanded all my attention. On the journey there were alleyways and side roads and alleys that I got stuck in. She dragged me back out of them, showing me that this had been how I had been living my life, finding little spaces to hide in. False starts. She made me say it out loud. False starts. I begged Greg to remember, then realized I hadn't said anything. I forced my mouth to shape the words and force them out. She told me what I was made for, my reason for being here, my purpose in life. She told me what my place was in the universe, and the answer was so obvious I was astounded. I wrote as much as I could before realizing my eyes were closed. I opened them and looked at the paper to see that it was unintelligible. I laughed and she did too, pleased that I was finally getting the message. Greg watched from the sofa and at the same time looked away. He was both standing and sitting. She shook me again, demanding that I listen, now that all my self-made defenses were down, now that I could finally hear. She forced me to write it down again and again and again. The letters grew across the page. The page seemed to be bottomless. She carried on talking, answering questions I hadn't even thought to ask. She answered everything in my mind, everything that I ever wanted to know. Greg told me to ask her anything else that I might have forgotten to ask. I did, and she answered. I was sitting on the edge of the universe with a pen and paper, scrawling down what I could while the rest of my body convulsed and slamming into the hard wooden floor, the cold glass door and the sharp pieces of firewood. She told me that it was no longer my fault, that I could fight against the things that had been bothering me and holding me back by utilizing my will. My will spread through me like golden tattoos racing up my body. I told her I didn't know how to move on, how to get better. She shouted again, slamming my body and arms against the floor. Your will, your will. I focused that golden light and used it to surround me and stand up, forcing my body to stand. See, she said, pleased again, clapping her hands in delight. You can do it. That's all it takes. It's as simple and as easy as that. She carried on speaking and flung me back down against the wall again and slowly gave my back, my arms and legs. My face and lips went numb and I sat up. She made me repeat what she had told me again and again until I grabbed the pen like a knife and wrote on my leg to prove to her that I had heard her. Satisfied that I had finally listened, she slowly left me, and I came out of the dark space of the other side of the universe back into this one, sitting on the floor, covered in spit and bile and tears and vomit, but clean.
Hello again. We hope that all of you enjoyed the story, and bring a sort of enlightenment towards you. Doing so brings us such joy and delight. Again, be sure to subscribe to the channel to help us reach our 1000 subscriber goal. And if you would like, you can also donate to help support our channel even further. The donation links will be in the description, and any amount will be greatly appreciated. Also, if you have any supernatural or paranormal experiences yourself, feel free to email us. If you would like your story to be heard, be sure to give us your name, or any alias you would like to be called, including your age and gender. We would gladly share your experience to others, as it will also help fulfill our purpose. Thank you for taking the time listening to these stories, and may your future days be filled with peace, joy, and blessings beyond. We love you all.